The official 1991 NCAA Championship video is brought to you by Rawlings, maker of the official ball for NCAA basketball championships.
Here's Hill, penetrating, dumps it off to Vegas, slashing layup, got it, he's fouled on the play! It's off the mark, it's over! The Blue Devils have pulled off the biggest upset in the history of Duke basketball! They have beaten the #1 UNLV Running Rebels! But he's up as the Blue Devils rebound. The lob to Grant. One-handed stop for Grant. What a play! Jordan lets fly. It is over. The Destiny Darlings have done it. The Duke Blue Devils.
The story of the 1991 NCAA basketball championship. Duke is king. The NCAA basketball tournament is all about intensity, resolve, and inevitably, frustration. After all, when the final buzzer goes off, only one team out of 64 can call itself a champion. But through it all, through 3 weeks of sweat and toil, we learned that there is a little bit of drama and excitement in nearly all of the tournament's games, and the will of champion in each and every tournament team. It seems, for instance, that an NCAA tournament wouldn't be complete without some last-second heroics, and 1991 was no different.
Now 5, moving on Jackson. He'll take it, shoot it, score it! And it's over!
If you're looking for a go-to guy, there he is, Steve Smith, number 21, who leads the Spartans in scoring, coming in with 25.2 a game.
And he's definitely the guy you want to go to, Greg, and I'm sure Wisconsin Green Bay knows that. That's why I would dub him. They don't have a foul that they could give.
Down to 3, Smith.
Oh, yes! Yes! Woo-hoo!
First-round upsets have also become an NCAA tradition. But until this year, when Richmond beat Syracuse, a number 15 seed had never won a tournament game. The Spiders' 73-69 win reminded many of their run to the Sweet 16 in 1988 and gave hope for underdogs everywhere. Like Brigham Young University, led by 7'6" freshman center Sean Bradley, the Cougars upset the University of Virginia as Bradley blocked an NCAA tournament record 10 shots in a 61-48 win. Ironically, it's a record that Bradley won't be able to break for at least 2 years. After this season, he's off on his mission for the Mormon Church. As for this year's missions, some felt that LSU's Shaquille O'Neal was the one player who could single-handedly lead his team to the Final Four. But in another first-round upset, the University of Connecticut took out the Tigers 79-62. The loss ended the season for O'Neal, who later was named the Associated Press College Player of the Year. In 1991, the 7'1" sophomore often dominated his rival centers, and his awesome presence in the middle was a marvel to watch. As the tournament progressed, several other All-Americas would bid farewell to 1991.
And Anderson, you can tell he's really trying to take control himself. Numbers.
After beating DePaul in the first round, Kenny Anderson and Georgia Tech would lose to Ohio State, the #1 seed in the Midwest. Tech had reached the Final Four in 1990, but this year the Rambling Wreck came up short. Ohio State's 65-61 win allowed them to move forward, while for Kenny Anderson, it was time to move on. Remarkably, one second-round game in the East region had 12th-seeded Eastern Michigan facing 13th-seeded Penn State. In a pair of first-round upsets, Eastern Michigan had crushed Mississippi State, while Penn State had just gotten by UCLA.
Money Brown. James Martin backing in against Hallis.
The resulting game was one of the tournament's most exciting, with the two Cinderella teams battling into overtime, before Eastern Michigan finally escaped with a 71-68 win.
Freddie Barnes lets it fly.
Their reward? A trip to the round of 16 for the first time in school history, and a meeting with the #1 seed in the East, North Carolina. Meanwhile, in the West, a couple of higher-seeded teams took their battle down to the wire as well, with 5th-seeded Michigan State engineering an unusual 4-point play to send its game with #4 seed Utah into overtime. Then, with the Spartans trailing by 2 points and with just under 5 seconds left, good fortune smiled on them once again.
Zuloff back up and got it!
Oh, the clock's going to run out. We're back at double.
Soto! Double overtime coming up.
But in that second overtime, Michigan State ran out of miracles. Utah built up an insurmountable lead, and although the Spartans eventually got to within a point, Utah would go on to play Nevada-Las Vegas in the round of 16.
You let the time run out. You can stand out of bounds with it.
And Jimmy Soto is looking at victory.
When the dust had settled on the tournament's first 4 days, 16 teams remained, and 16 coaches were left to wonder just what it was about this time of year that makes them act the way they do. Aside from Eastern Michigan, the Temple Owls were perhaps the most surprising of the 16 remaining teams. And in the regional semis against 3rd-seeded Oklahoma State, the Owls had a much tougher time than in their previous wins over Purdue and Richmond. Oklahoma State had glided by New Mexico and North Carolina State. But against the 10th-seeded Owls, the Cowboys needed a basket at the end of the game just to stay alive.
For 3, and he scores!
Actually, since Williams' toe was on the line, he was only given credit for 2 points, and so the game moved into overtime, where Temple's Mark Macon led an early 8-point Owl run from which the Cowboys could never recover. Temple had a 72-63 victory and a matchup in the round of the Elite Eight with North Carolina. Two teams from the Big East also engineered upsets in the round of 16. In the Midwest, St. John's took on the top seed Ohio State. And by the time the first half was over, the Buckeyes hardly looked like the team that had shared the Big Ten title.
Score the basket.
Led by Robert Werdan's career-high 21 points, the Redmen ran right by the Buckeyes, leading at times by more than 24 points in an easy 91-74 win.
Take it uncontested.
Great play by Chucky Strolling.
Here's Singleton. Back pass to Strolling. Wow.
For St. John's and coach Lou Carnesecca, the victory gave the Redmen a chance to return to the Final Four for the first time since 1985. Out west, Arizona was looking forward to meeting UNLV. However, P.J. Carlesimo and Seton Hall stood in the way.
Loose ball and a 2-on-1 break for Seton Hall and Terry DeHare with the layup.
Once again, the Pirates' Terry DeHare would score more than 25 points, as he had in the Hall's two previous tournament wins over Pepperdine and Creighton. But with Arizona's Chris Mills keeping the Wildcats in the game, neither team could gain much of an advantage in the second half. Ultimately, Seton Hall would gain the upper hand, and Arizona's attempt at a come-from-behind win would come up short.
Swarming defense by Seton Hall with less than 10 seconds to go. Optic for three, fires. Not much time.
For the second time in the last 3 seasons, Seton Hall would face UNLV in the West Regional Final. Only this time, the results would be different. Ultimately, the real story of the 1991 NCAA Basketball Championship was the way in which the 4 teams that eventually made it to Indianapolis had dominated their opponents. 13 out of the 16 games the Final 4 teams had played were decided by 10 points or more, and the average margin of victory in all their games was an astounding 16 points. It was clear that the tournament's 4 best teams would gather in Indianapolis. From the East came the number 1 seed, North Carolina. The Tar Heels entered the NCAAs on a roll, having swept past Duke 96-74 in the conference tournament to win their 12th ACC crown. Led all year by the steady ball handling of senior guard King Rice and the inside play of George Lynch and Rick Fox, North Carolina finished the regular season with a record of 25-5 and a history-making 17th consecutive appearance in the NCAAs. In the tournament, North Carolina won its first 3 games by an average of 25 points and then faced Temple in the regional final that went down to the wire.
Right here. Instead, it's a basket by George Lynch. This is Macon for 3.
Overcoming 36 points from Temple guard Mark Macon, Carolina came up with several big baskets down the stretch and then held on as Temple's attempt to tie the game at the buzzer came up short.
Macon for 3. On target. And it's over. And Carolina advances to the Final Four.
From the Southeast came Kansas, the region's number 3 seed and the only real surprise team in the Final Four. Keyed by an undefeated record at home, Kansas entered the tournament with a mark of 22-7, led by the outstanding threesome of Alonzo Jameson, Mark Randall, and Terry Brown. The Jayhawks won a share of the Big 8 title. In the tournament, Kansas won twice before it upset Bobby Knight and Indiana, romping over the Hoosiers 83-65. The Jayhawks followed that surprise with another in the regional final against top-seeded Arkansas. Trailing the Razorbacks by 12 at halftime, Kansas turned the game around in the second half to earn a trip to Indy, the Jayhawks' 3rd trip to the Final Four in the last 6 years. From the Midwest came the number 2 seed, Duke. Once again in 1991, the Duke Blue Devils took their place among the nation's elite teams. Led by point guard Bobby Hurley and center Christian Laettner, Duke won 26 games along with a regular season ACC title that included 2 wins over North Carolina. In the tournament, Duke breezed past Northeast Louisiana, Iowa, and Connecticut, and then finished off its 4-game sweep by running right past a St. John's team that was forced to play most of the game without center Robert Wardan, who had led the Redmen over Ohio State.
Break opportunity for Bobby Hurley. Flips it over to Grant Hill. The follow by Thomas Hill.
The Blue Devils' 78-61 win meant that a familiar face was back in the Final Four.
Here's Clark. The Duke Blue Devils are headed back to the Final Four. An amazing 4 years in a row and 5 out of 6.
Out of the West came UNLV, the #1 team in the country and the defending national champions.
That's what he could do. Very young. Fakes and drives. Baseline 8-footer in the air. Good.
Picking up where they left off last season, the Runnin' Rebels continued to roll this year. The Rebels' devastating starting lineup was by far the country's most imposing. Led by first-team All-Americas Stacey Augmon and Larry Johnson, UNLV did not even come close to losing a game in the regular season in its attempt to become the first undefeated national champions since Indiana in 1976. Talk about total domination. The Rebels were #1 ranked all season long. They scored more than 100 points 17 times and averaged 101 points per game. They had a 29 points per game average margin of victory, and they won by 40 or more points 8 times. The tournament looked to be more of the same as UNLV started out with a 34-point victory over Montana. But against Georgetown, the Rebels got a scare and only managed to win by 8. After a romp over Utah, UNLV really put it all together in the regional finals against Seton Hall. Smothering defense in the second half got the Rebels off and running and sent UNLV on its way to its second consecutive Final Four and third in the last 5 years.
Larry UNLV wins it 77-65, and they'll go to Indy.
On the last weekend in March, the 4 teams came to Indiana, a place where native Hoosiers have long said about basketball that they play it and coach it better than anyone.
That's better. Better. 10-10.
Well, at the Friday practice, the Hoosiers proved that they know how to stage it and watch it better too, as more than 25,000 fans came out to the Hoosier Dome to watch the teams put on what's become a traditional show.
The coaches, they're on the side. They're not going to have too much.
Wow. 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 Wow.
By far, the team commanding the most attention was UNLV, and the question most asked was how to beat the undefeated Runnin' Rebels.
You have to go into the game thinking that you're going to do everything necessary to win, to play as a team, to play smart basketball. You can throw the game plans out the window. Beating UNLV is an attitude.
Can't let them throw the ball the length of the floor and up-tempo everything because they'll just run you out of the ballpark.
Well, you're going to have to pray, and then you're also going to have to play a perfect game.
If you sneak into the locker room before the game and you deflate all their sneakers, cut them in half, all right, hide their uniforms, tie their laces together, and then lock the door to make sure that even with those problems, they don't get out, because even with those problems, they could probably still get out and win.
They don't show up.
You mean if they don't show up the way they're capable of playing?
Right.
Yeah.
Probably there's no way this year to beat them.
On Final Four Saturday, the fans who gathered in Indianapolis were afforded a huge dose of that famous Hoosier hospitality. Allegiances varied, but one thing was certain. If anyone was going to beat UNLV, there would be more than 47,000 folks on hand at the Hoosier Dome to see it.
Jayhawks #1 Kansas! Go Blue Devils!
Rebels all the way, #1.
Hey, we're ready to go. Devils.
No, UNLV. All the way.
North Carolina's going to win and UNLV's going to win.
Oh, I think Duke's going to upset UNLV this afternoon.
Saturday's first national semifinal pitted the student against the teacher. Former Carolina assistant and now Kansas coach Roy Williams against Dean Smith and North Carolina.
And this opening semifinal game matches the Jayhawks of Kansas against the Tar Heels of North Carolina. This is the 10th Final Four for the Tar Heels, the 8th time they've been guided by Dean Smith. And of course, it's the first time since 1982 in the national championship.
I do have the greatest amount of respect that you can possibly have for Dean Smith. I'm where I am today because of Dean Smith.
Williams had spent his formative coaching years learning the profession under Smith's watchful eye. And now, as far as the teacher was concerned, the pupil was getting straight A's.
Roy's got a great mind of his own, and he had 10 years as assistant. He worked 50 hours a week and was a great assistant, and he's a great head coach, and I'm happy as I can be for him.
They've filled every seat here in the Hoosier Dome for this Final Four, the dream of every college basketball player and coach.
At the end of the game, you're going to have different feelings. You're going to be elated if you win. If you lose, you're going to be very, very depressed, but you also know that you lost to somebody that is extremely important to you. But I want to win.
With the two teams running their similar offenses, both Kansas and North Carolina traded baskets for the game's first few minutes.
Double team by Rice. Fox down low to Lynch. Lynch getting away from Maddox. Layup is good. Carolina leads 4-3.
Lynn low to Alonzo against Fox. He lays it up and in. A great move by Alonzo, the MVP of the Southeast Regional. Get the ball!
Eventually, though, Carolina began to spurt ahead. Trailing by 9, the Jayhawks knew it was time to fall back on their pregame strategy.
Backdoor to Fox. Layup is good.
The similarities between the two teams are such that we have different variations in our offense. They have different variations in their offense. And I just think it's the team that's going to go out and do the little things on top of that. I think is the team that's going to come out and be successful.
Midway through the first half, that's exactly what Kansas did. Once the Jayhawks began to improvise, the game began to turn around.
And these Jayhawks are not playing ugly right now. They're putting together a beautiful run against this vaunted North Carolina team.
Over an 8-minute stretch at the tail end of the first half, Kansas outscored Carolina 24-6 to take command of the game.
Hawks have tied it after trailing by 9.
Look at the KU section of the Hoosier Dome. Everybody on his feet.
They wheel it around to Adonis for a three-pointer. He hit it. Adonis answers with a tray. And
once ahead by 9, the Heels find themselves down 9 going to the locker room.
Throughout the first half, it was obvious that both North Carolina and Kansas had found it tough to play against defenses that knew exactly what the offenses were trying to do. The Jayhawks' 9-point halftime lead proved that they had come to the realization first that the team that could freelance best would win. But in the second half, Carolina would catch on, and the game would once again become an intense battle.
Come on, defense, let's go, Jayhawks, come on!
it done at the beginning of the game. The two teams traded baskets at the start of the second half. Then, with 15 minutes left, Carolina made a desperate attempt to climb back into the game. Over an 8-minute span, Carolina had outscored Kansas 14-5 and narrowed the Jayhawks' lead to a single point. But the Tar Heels never could pull ahead. Led by substitute forward Richard Scott, whose 16 points in the game were more than Carolina's entire bench, the Jayhawks rebuilt their lead as quickly as it had disappeared. With the game at its most critical stage, Kansas out-hustled and then outshot Carolina, scoring 7 unanswered points in 3 minutes to break the game wide open.
Want to do something quickly. Adonis drives inside. He scores! He's fouled! The basket counts!
The clock was going down, and once I got into the lane, I was wide open. So I went up, and it was kind of a key of the whole game that we made the big shots when it counted, and that was a big bucket for us.
At the other end of the court, North Carolina missed its big shots, and although the Tar Heels would eventually narrow the Kansas lead to 5, missed opportunities during that crucial 3-minute stretch proved too much to overcome. On this night, the pupil had taught the teacher a lesson, and when Dean Smith received his second technical and was ejected from the game with less than a minute remaining, he can at least take solace in knowing that a man who had shared his bench for 10 years would lead Kansas to its second championship game in the last 4 years. The evening's second semifinal between UNLV and Duke was a rematch of the 1990 championship game. On that night, Vegas humiliated the Devils, winning by 30 points, the most lopsided margin in the history of the championship game.
Last year's loss in the final, in the championship game, helped prepare me for this. And I never want my kids to look at a loss as the end of the world. Should learn how to go for it and not be afraid.
But this time, with 5 extra days to prepare, Duke devised a plan.
The defensive keys for us would be, 1, to limit their fast break opportunities. Secondly, limit second shots. And then try in some way to find Hunt in the half-court offense all the time. And limit Johnson as much as possible. Leitner and Hurley are 2 key guys. Leitner should be able to score some against them. Bobby just needs to control everything for us, maintain poise under the most defensive pressure he will have faced all year long.
Basically, this is a new team, and I just think that we're kind of getting tired of all the questions about last year's game, and hopefully we'll do some good things in this game, and people will start talking about this one in a positive way.
And the things that are going to make us win the game are what's inside each and every player on our team. It's not game plan, and it's pretty much not X's and O's. It's the heart that everyone has on our team, and how hard we're going to play and the intensity we're going to play at, because that's pretty much the only way you can beat UNLV. You have to play harder than them, and you have to play better than them.
With a cool confidence that befits a team with a 45-game winning streak, the self-assured Rebels appeared to show little of the emotion that came out of their opponents' pregame huddle.
No holding back. 1, 2, 3, win!
Perhaps that lack of outward passion hurt UNLV, especially when Duke came out bent on preventing a repeat of a year ago.
First points of the ball game. Important for Duke to get off to a good start and hang in there. This is one of the few times all year that UNLV has been behind.
As the possessors of an undefeated record, UNLV had rarely been behind, but it would soon find out this game would be unlike any other it had played all year.
Early hustling front court, shoots a long bounce pass, leading it to Grant Hill. Layup goes! And underneath Leitner, wide open, laying good. To the way to Grant Hill. Now the lob in the lane. Got away from this man. Laid it up and in. Grant Hill one-on-one against Johnson. Pull-up jumper from the freshman. Good.
Led by Christian Leitner's 9 quick points, Duke jumped out to a 15-6 lead within the game's first 4 minutes. The Devils were executing their pregame plan to perfection, while UNLV's vaunted man-to-man pressure defense was nowhere to be seen. For perhaps the first time this season, the Rebels were forced into a sense of urgency.
And look at the Amoeba defense right away by Jerry Tarkanian. He was getting torn up in the man-to-man.
Right away, Tarkanian's move paid off as UNLV quickly got back into the game. The Rebels' smothering defense ignited their offense, and their intense work on the boards began to pay off. The next 4 minutes would belong to Vegas.
Hurley's pass maybe telegraphed a bit. Augman stole it. Duke unable to do anything against the Amoeba so far. Anthony hustling, coming up short. Getting it back, however.
He is a tough kid.
And UNLV ties it at 18.
With visions of last season's massacre lurking in the back of their minds, Duke could not afford to be intimidated by this UNLV run. If ever there was a time for the Devils to show their mettle, this was it. With Bobby Hurley controlling the offense, Duke simply would not let this game get away. The Rebels, too, were beginning to find their range, but Duke answered every UNLV basket with one of its own.
Grant Hill has it. Bounce pass ahead to Bobby Hurley. Going down on Hunt. Over the head. Oh! Grant Hill slam dunk. Dumps it off to Augman. Shot will go and he's fouled. And tips it to Leitner, who puts it up and in. Christian Leitner back the other end. A driving layup. Good by Anderson Hunt. As Ackles flew by out to Hurley. 3, yes! Bobby Hurley. Ahead it goes to Anthony. Off to Hunt. Driving for the layup. Good. Down low to Leitner. Got inside. Dribbles. Stucks it and he's fouled on the play by George Ackles. Here come the Rebels. 3-pointer from out of the corner. Anderson Hunt. Good. Jump pass to Hurley. They got a screen from Kubek. 3-pointer. Yes! Anthony with a 3. Yes! Greg Anthony's second 3. And we're tied at 37 all.
Unlike last year, UNLV just could not pull away. Despite 16 first-half points from senior guard Greg Anthony, Duke hung tough. And after the first 20 minutes, the Blue Devils trailed the #1 team in the country by just a single basket.
Trying to set up Johnson, and the half is here. UNLV by 2. Excellent half of basketball. The end of the first half, the score, UNLV 43, Duke 41.
Much of the reason for Duke's first-half success could be found in the play of center Christian Leitner, whose 20 points baffled the normally unflappable UNLV defenders.
We started off the game by putting George on Leitner, and that was a big mistake because Leitner just went wild the first half. And, you know, because George is pretty quick, but he can't guard Leitner, and we knew that because Leitner just killed Shaquille O'Neal when he took him outside, and Leitner caused us all kinds of trouble defensively. Larry was the only guy that can guard him, but when Larry guarded him, there was nobody that George could guard or nobody that Elmore could guard.
Duke returned for the second half a confident team. And if UNLV had any doubts that it was to be in for the fight of its life, then Jerry Tarkanian and his now stumbling Rebels were quickly reminded when the Blue Devils once again started strong. Surprisingly, Duke was having very little trouble getting free for shots, and they were playing with a reckless abandon that comes with the swagger of success.
Ogman dumped away, knocked away, and picked up by Hurley. Bobby up the right side on Anthony, all the way flying layup, score the goal, and he's fouled.
UNLV's invincible aura was clearly in danger, but keyed by the explosive play of Anderson Hunt, the Rebels stayed close to Duke, not allowing the Devils to extend their slim lead. In this physically and mentally intense game, there was no backing down on either side.
This basketball team has a tremendous amount of heart. We didn't read the article that said bring on the Rebels and send out the clowns. The one thing that we thought we could bring to this game was a fighting sort of attitude. You know, a lot of teams this year probably have backed down from Vegas, and we're not going to back down from anyone, and they knew that they were in a fight at that point in the game.
One Vegas player who definitely knew he was in for a fight was Larry Johnson. UNLV's most potent offensive weapon had struggled through much of the game, as much a focal point of the Duke defensive game plan as any other Rebel in UNLV's All-America lineup.
They fronted Larry and they let George alone when he came to the high post. They left Leitner back so that he could double down on Larry if we threw it to him. They left George alone, and George is not a real great shooter.
Making it difficult as possible for Johnson, because we had no one person who could guard him. In fact, I think Larry's points came mainly from rebounds. Offensively, though, we just tried to make it difficult for him to drive. Johnson's great. I mean, you can't guard him man for man.
Without Johnson's typically dominating game, UNLV's pressurized attack wasn't scaring anybody, least of all Bobby Hurley, who was able to dictate the second half tempo. In last year's championship game, freshman Hurley and the Devils had wilted under UNLV's relentless onslaught, but this year Hurley calmly took charge. Executing Coach K's plan to a T, Duke maintained a tenuous hold on its lead. With just over 10 minutes remaining, it looked as if the Blue Devils' pregame wish of getting UNLV into a back-and-forth, down-to-the-wire struggle was going to come true.
Greg Kubek. Johnson fakes, dribbles, shoots, and scores. Hunt starts to the baseline.
In fact, Duke actually increased its lead to 5 before UNLV used several of Anderson Hunt's 19 second-half points to rally and tie the score at 65. Still, it was now becoming increasingly clear that UNLV, a team that hadn't played a single close game the entire year, would have to win this one down the stretch.
UNLV being threatened like at no other time this season, leading by 1 with 7:20 to go.
After being outscored 9-3, Duke needed a spark, and they found one in Brian Davis, who came off the bench to score 4 of his 12 second-half points. The Rebels, however, did not back down. Towards the end of a 17-7 run, UNLV successfully tightened its defense and held Duke without a point for close to 3 minutes. With just under 4 minutes to go, Vegas had surged to a 3-point lead. They looked to be in command until their leader committed a costly foul.
And yes, they called a charge on Anthony. No basket. And that's it.
He's out of here.
5 for Anthony.
He carried this team.
With Greg Anthony lost to fouls, the Rebels would have to finish the game without their most experienced ball handler. Nevertheless, with just 2.5 minutes to go, UNLV went up by 5, and its dream of winning consecutive national championships seemed alive and well. But this time, Duke had an answer for UNLV.
UNLV's biggest of the ball game at 76-71. 2:19 to play. Hurley for 3. Bottom!
Bobby Hurley's third three-pointer of the game brought the Devils to within 2 points. And then after UNLV failed to get off a shot on its next possession, Duke came back yet again.
Penetrating, dumps it off to Davis, slashing layup. Got it! He's out of the play!
Brian Davis's basket and subsequent foul shot gave Duke a 1-point lead. Then after Larry Johnson tied the game, the Blue Devils went for the win.
18 seconds left. Thomas Hill going to the hole. Pull-up jumper is up. It rolls off. Tip. Leitner has a loose ball and he's fouled on the play. No shot. No shot. That means it's 2 free throws for Leitner with 12 seconds left.
I put myself in his shoes and I say, I know I'd be nervous. I hope I hit one. He wanted to shoot those free throws. There's no way in the world he was going to miss. There's no doubt that he was going to hit them.
Maybe the 2 most important free throws of his career. First one's good. Duke leads at 78-77. Shots up. Shots in. Duke by 2. 79-77.
For UNLV, a season full of 40 and 50-point wins was about to come down to a single 12 seconds.
Duke's going to double-team Hunt on the inbounds play. They're going to let it come in to Anderson, to Ackles. Now to Johnson, make him bring it up with 9 seconds left. Johnson to the right side. Johnson fakes, looking, 5 seconds to Hunt. Anderson, Hunt stops, fires a 3. No! It's off the mark! It's over! The Blue Devils have pulled off the biggest upset in the history of Duke basketball! The biggest upset in the history of Duke basketball! And they have beaten the #1 UNLV Running Rebels. 79-77.
Let's pass out the sharp beat in Durham.
Holy cow, what a finish. Christian Leitner's 2 free throws with 12 seconds left.
With one incredible victory, Mike Krzyzewski and Duke had wiped away 4 previous years of Final Four frustration. The rich story of Duke basketball includes 8 previous trips to the Final Four. But the team's recent success of appearing in 5 of the last 6 Final Fours has been nothing short of phenomenal. Until now, Duke's only problem had not been in getting to the Final Four, but winning both games when it got there. Ironically, Krzyzewski's biggest concern now was in celebrating too soon.
Immediately, I was thinking about our next game because I approached the game not to beat Vegas. We've approached this to win the national championship. You know, did I feel good about the win? Darn right, just like I would if during the first half of a ball game. If it's a 40-minute ball game, I feel good if we're ahead at halftime. Well, we're ahead at halftime now. Now what do we do in the second half?
So it would be Duke and Kansas in the tournament's final game.
People say we're the Cinderella team right now, and I feel like we're in the land of Oz right now, you know.
You don't know how to experience it until you know that you've won the national championship game, and so I'm waiting for that to happen, to tell you the truth, because we've missed our chances the past 2 years.
This is a special time, and I never felt this way before in my whole entire life, so I'm gonna try to just make the best of it.
To have another chance of playing a title game is a great feeling, and I just feel we have to take advantage of this opportunity, and it'll feel great if we win it all. It really will.
We can do it. We got 40 minutes. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Play defense, have fun.
This is our night. This is our night. I got one.
Hey, look. Let's look each other in the eye right now. So before we got on the court, there's no tomorrow for us. We're gonna win a national championship.
Come on, man.
Let's go. Let's go. Hey, man. You can't pace yourself because there's no tomorrow. Let's go. 1 game, 2, 3, win.
With Bobby Hurley again running the offense, Duke showed no signs of a feared letdown. Greg Kubek's three-pointer opened the scoring, and then Grant Hill put an exclamation point on an early Devil run.
Oh, can you believe he got that high? Jim, that ball was thrown to the point that it was going out of bounds. I don't know how he got up there to get it.
I never thought he would save it, much less dunk it.
That was a David Thompson-type dunk from yesteryear.
Hill's astounding dunk gave Duke a 7-1 lead, but the Jayhawks, who seemed lethargic at first, soon began to get back into the game. With Mark Randall scoring 6 of Kansas's first 7 points, the Jayhawks sliced away at the Duke lead. Then, with 5.5 minutes gone, Kansas closed to within a single point when Terry Brown hit the Jayhawks' first three-pointer of the game. But Duke responded to the challenge.
Brian Davis on the right side. Brian with that slashing move coming in the lane. Running one-hander, up and in for Brian Davis. Hurley to Thomas Hill, driving, pins it back outside. Hurley, three, yes!
Boy, has that guy had one whale of an NCAA tournament.
7-point lead now, 18-11.
Kansas, however, kept on coming, hitting 5 of its next 7 shots to again close in on Duke.
Left side Adonis, three-pointer, count it. Three-pointer by Adonis Jordan. Then back out to Terry, three-pointer, swish! Terry nails the three, and the Hawks are within 1.
Boy, great to see him.
Mike Krzyzewski, however, had little reason to fear the latest Kansas run. Throughout the entire NCAA tournament, whenever he needed someone to lead the Blue Devils, Bobby Hurley answered the call. And the championship game was more of the same. In 6 tournament games, Hurley had 43 assists and just 9 turnovers. Perhaps even more amazing, in the Final Four, Hurley played the entire 80 minutes, directing the Duke offense with an equal mix of poise and presence and the reckless abandon that comes with the arrogance of one who knows he's in total control. If Bobby Hurley's first Final Four was a nightmare, then his second must have been a dream come true. A year ago in the championship game, he failed to score a single point. But this year, his 12 points included 2 three-pointers.
Sideline turn, take the wide open three and buries it. Bobby Hurley.
Hurley not only began yet another Duke rally with his second three-pointer of the game, he also continually zeroed in on Duke's hottest hand. In this case, Billy McCaffrey, who came off the bench to make all 3 of his first half shots, on the way to scoring 16 in the championship game.
Billy McCaffrey, who would rather shoot with a hand in his face than eat when he's hungry, drills it home again.
McCaffrey's three-pointer capped a 10-2 spurt and gave Duke its largest lead to that point at 36-27. Kansas soon cut into that, but with time winding down before the half, the Jayhawks lost a chance to get within 3.
39-34. Richard looking for a teammate, puts it on the floor now, goes to the corner. And what do we have?
Stepped on the sideline, apparently. 10 seconds, 9, as Hurley comes across the midcourt line. Bobby eyeing the basket, a little one-on-one move, going around Jordan, kicks it behind him. Thomas Hill, 3, yes! At the buzzer! Thomas Hill drills a 3, and the Blue Devils will take an 8-point lead to the locker room at the intermission, 42-34. And we'll be back with him.
Perhaps the biggest reason for Duke's lead was Kansas's uncharacteristic inability to make its inside shots. Normally a tough inside team, Kansas missed continually from short range.
I've never seen the basket seem like it had a lid on it for Kansas like it did tonight. I felt like we had so many good shots around the hoop that just didn't fall in. We miss a layup and get the rebound, tap it, get the rebound, put it back up, miss it, tap it, miss it. And then all of a sudden it goes out of bounds off of us.
In spite of their inside problems, when the second half began, the Jayhawks went right to Mark Randall, who was beginning to wear down Christian Laettner.
High lane, dumps it into Randall, who lays it in.
Boy, he's getting inside of Leitner very effectively. And it's a 4-point game, folks.
2 days before, against UNLV, Leitner had exhausted himself. And now in the biggest game of his life, he would have to fight fatigue.
There were many times during this game where I was winded. I couldn't seem to catch my breath at all. But I think that's mainly because of Mark Randall, and I had to chase him up and down the court the whole game. And Coach did a good job giving me rest.
I knew right away that this was going to be a long night for Christian, in that it was going to be a very physical game, and I was going to have to play 4-minute segments with him. He gets hammered.
Finding the inner strength for one last run, Duke responded to the latest Kansas challenge.
Back of the dribble, gives it off to McCaffrey, coming off the screen. The jumper's perfect. Grant starts inside. That long leap with a running one-hander. It's up and it's in. Grant Hill. McCaffrey sends it away to Hurley. Now the lob back door. Brian Davis slam dunk.
That's how you break the 1-3-1.
Rising to a new level, the Blue Devils kept the pressure on Kansas, and soon their slim lead would turn into a comfortable margin as the game entered its most critical phase. Over a crucial 10-minute span, Duke outscored Kansas by 10 to take a 14-point lead with just 6 minutes remaining. For Kansas, time was running out. The Jayhawks, however, had come too far to simply pack it in. Kansas kept fighting and ran off 10 points to Duke's 3 to get to within 7 with 2 minutes to go. But in the end, Duke's margin would prove to be too great to overcome. Kansas would not win the national championship this season, but it had come much further than anyone had expected. During their memorable 3-week run, the Jayhawks had upset 3 of the nation's top 5 teams and were just 1 win away from a title. It was a title that would go to Duke.
Mouse play comes into Brian Davis, who got behind. Brian slam dunk, and the Blue Devils go up by 7. 72 to 65 with 19 seconds left. Down the left side goes Winberry. 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3, 2, Jordan, let's fly. It is over. The Destiny Darlings have done it. The Duke Blue Devils have won their first ever national basketball championship. 72 to 65 over the Kansas Jayhawks. There is pandemonium here above the Duke faithful.
After 8 previous times in the Final Four, Duke had finally won its national championship. In a year when nobody realistically expected the Devils to win, they did. And for Coach Mike Krzyzewski, the night that Duke became king was his crowning achievement.
We played 2 incredibly good basketball teams in Vegas and Kansas, and it took an emotional and physical investment for 80 minutes. The fact that my team could do that, I love that. Even when we got the trophy, the thought came in, I'm happy for this team, and I'm happy for the teams that helped prepare me to be here, and I hope those kids shared in the national title, like Tommy Amaker and Johnny Dawkins and Mark Allery and them. And then there was a moment where my 3 daughters and wife came out on the floor, and you give kind of like a family hug. And my little one, Jamie, she's 9, she was caught in the middle, she was screaming, she says, hey, let me, you're squeezing me. And to me, those are the best moments.
Duke had done it. After shocking UNLV, the Blue Devils defeated Kansas to win the NCAA championship. Against all odds, the Duke was king. The official 1991 NCAA championship video was brought to you by Rawlings, maker of the official ball for NCAA basketball championships.